And I know Bill because he was my high school civics teacher. In 1986, my priorities were a little different. Like most teenage students, I'm sure I wasn't too concerned with world events. But and I'm sure I wasn't too observant to recognize a great statesman such as Bill Gallagher. Now, however, I'm grateful for those foundation principles, that love of country that was taught to me in high school. In 2010, like most of us in this room, Bill was a little upset with politics and the direction they were taking. So he took a bold step, leap of faith, left his comfortable life, a successful business, and he ran for Public Service Commissioner of District 5. In the primary, he defeated a former Secretary of State, Brad Johnson, an almost unbelievable feat, topped only when Bill unseated the well-entrenched and equally well-funded Ken School. Once elected, again, natural leader that Bill is, his fellow committeemen recognized him and appointed him chairman. Knowing Bill as I do, it is my sincere hope that Bill will remain in the political arena for many years to come. For our country, state, and our party need leaders of undaunting integrity such as Bill Gallagher. I honor that.
Thank you, Mary. Those were very kind words, and that wasn't what I wrote out for you to say. But, very nice. Hello, Sanders County Republicans. Hello. Great day for a rodeo, isn't it? Yeah. I want to thank you for the invitation to come and visit with you. I'm a little bit disconcerted, though. One of my themes is how important the local Sanders County Central Committee is, and I think just the fact that this room is filled probably suggests that you already know that. It's good to be home. Plains is my adopted hometown. I don't know if you adopted me here in Plains or if I adopted you, but you should know that as a child I led pretty much a nomadic existence. My father and then later stepfather worked in the railroad and in highway construction, and so we moved around all the time. For those of you that are familiar with railroad, I grew up in an outfit car, which is a precursor to a mobile home on the railroad tracks. They'd take a box car, turn it into a house, and then they would just ship the family wherever they needed my daddy to work, and we would live on the sidings. And that's why every time I'm in Plains and I hear that train come through, I smile because it makes me comfortable and I am home. Mary mentioned that I've been married for 32 years to my lovely bride Jennifer, and since she isn't here for me to introduce, I feel free to tell the story about our engagement some 32 years ago. It was a romantic evening. It was just her and I, her father, his shotgun, and his explanation to me that I had basically two routes and choices in life. One of them involved marrying his daughter. The other one held potentially 25 years in the state penitentiary. And I guess I think about that a lot these days, because I would have been out 7 years by now, maybe more, for good behavior. I am interestingly enough, they put it on their thing, I am currently the highest ranking Republican elected official in Montana state government, which Public Service Commission chairman has that distinction. We've got to change that, folks. And I'm glad you give me all the feedback, because it didn't work at home. I was explaining this point to my wife when we were having a visit about certain tasks around the house, and I explained to her that I was the highest ranking. But I don't care if you're Brian Schweitzer, you're still taking the trash out on Wednesday night. But I love my new job. It's even more important than I thought it was. In fact, I'm the chairman gives me far more influence than I thought that I might have. But it is not a natural place for me. I'm much more comfortable over at the VFW at one of your spaghetti dinner benefit feeds than I am with some of the crowds that I get to work with. Here a month or two ago, I had agreed to be the master of ceremonies for the Lewis and Clark County Central Committee's Lincoln Reagan dinner, which I did that because the Central Committee, that one and all of the counties that I ran in were so helpful to me that I owe a debt of gratitude, and I said, sure, I'll help out. And then it turned out that Denny Reberg decided he would use that forum to announce that he was going to run for the United States Senate to take out John Tester. They invited now presidential candidate Michelle Bachmann in to speak. And so it made the event of Helena, and it was very tense. And then to make it even more exciting, they sat my wife and I right next to the congressman and his wife and the former governor of Montana, Babcock. And, you just want to get through something like that without showing that, doing something stupid. And we managed to get through it. It came off quite well. But that evening, my wife told me, she said, "Bill, thank heavens that lady asked you to pass her the plate of butter." On our table, there was a round platter, and on it were these little dollops. They looked like Hershey's Kisses. They were yellow, and they were made like they make the cake frosting. And somebody asked me, and they pointed to them, and I thought, oh, okay, so I moved that over there. My wife said, "I thought they were buttermints." And she said, "I am so glad that lady asked you to pass the butter," because she said 5 more seconds, and I was going to reach out and eat it, and I would have embarrassed you in front of the congressman. And what I didn't tell my wife was 5 more seconds, and I would have had it in the butter. So it's been interesting. Let me make a comment about Mr. Daines. Besides the fact that I just have such admiration, and I am so impressed with him as a candidate for U.S. Congress, I want to make note that great leaders know when and how to be good followers. Nobody goes out for the football team and says, "I'm going to be first-string quarterback or I don't play." You play where the team needs you. You take the position the coach gives you, and you do what needs to be done for the team. Steve Daines' campaign started out, as you may recall, he was going to run for the United States Senate until Dennis Reberg announced that he was going to. And there was a very quiet shift in his campaign. And I didn't ask his permission to point this out because it was the level of maturity and the grace and the dignity with which he made that transition expressed to me volumes about his character and his perspective on public service. And I told him as much. And his response to me, and I wrote it down so that I could quote it because it was even more impressive. He said to me, "Bill, these seats do not belong to any one person. They belong to the people they serve." I also like courageous politicians who are willing to wade in to situations just like this one, where you don't know what's going to come out. And so I applaud the courage of these gentlemen who have waded in here to ask you for their support and tell you about their particular platform. Ken Miller is going to be he will be the hardest working candidate for governor. I've already seen that. You know a lot. Hard work will forgive an awful lot of sins. Show up on time and hard worker. A while back I was being introduced to speak to a group in Helena, Montana, and the fellow got up to introduce me, and he started out, he didn't read the script either. He started out with, "I knew Bill Gallagher, but he was nobody." And then he went on to tell how his name was Jim Meyer, and back in the 80s, he was a teacher and the girls' JV basketball coach in Troy. Is Troy still in Class D? Is they in your league? And he was my counterpart. I was the high school government teacher here, and I was the JV girls basketball coach. All of you know Bob and Diane Johnston. They're now retired. He was the varsity basketball coach, and Paul Dumas. They won the state championship that year. But he said, this guy introduced me like that, and I didn't say anything, but I thought, wait a minute. Being a high school government teacher and girls basketball coach in Plains, Montana, that's not nobody. I was somebody. Those were the years of my life. I'm telling you, it was a miracle I got that job. It's a miracle I get this job, but almost everything in my life is a miracle, so I'm kind of used to it. They called me up to offer me the position, and I thought that I had maybe presented pretty well at the interviews, and the superintendent said, "Well, You weren't our first pick, actually you weren't our second. The first two guys who were offered the job had already taken other jobs, and you were third on the list. So I signed that contract. $12,272 was my teaching salary for that first year, and it was a month. My wife and I were reminiscing about our lives now compared to our lives then. You know, I look around the room, and we've got some life veterans here, and you remember when it was you were poor, and we would go to McGowan's and buy enough hamburger for 4 patties and that little hibachi, and go down to the beach at the fairgrounds and cook them up, and we just lived a high lifestyle, even though the wife and I were talking about how poor we were. We lived in a double-wide mobile home over here on 3rd. I rented it from Cliff while he was the banker then. We had these ratty vehicles. We didn't have a TV except somebody loaned us a black and white TV and no money in the bank. And I said to my wife, I said, but you know, we might have been poor, but every night I was going to bed with a pretty 21-year-old woman. And we were talking about how it is now. I put a few acorns away. I don't have a great house, but I have a nice house. Better cars. 2002 is the newest one, but believe me, it's better than what I had then. But we got the big screen TV and all of that. And so I thought I'd be smart. I said to my wife, the only downside now is every night I go to bed with somebody's grandmother. Honey, listen, if you want to sleep with a 21-year-old, she says, you just go pick you out a pretty one. I'll take care of putting you back in that double wide. I want to tell you just one more quick story about, because I said I adopted you as my hometown, and that means more than subscribing to the Clark Poor Valley Press for 28 years. But I want to just tell you the story about my second year of teaching. Marilyn Vanderhoff was the realtor's daughter here. She called me and said, Bill, there's a guy, Ed Hughes, the guy that has the island out there. He was going through a divorce. He built his house. It's not finished. He needs to sell it. It'd be great for a young teacher like you. So we bought it, and it was sheetrock, but there was nothing in it. We had to do all of the interior work on it. There was no insulation and no heat. And so we spent the summer getting the house ready. I was down to my last few dollars in my budget, and it was either insulation or electric baseboard heaters. And I thought, well, I could insulate all I want, but with no heat, I'd freeze to death. So I spent some money on the heater. I talked to John Bauman. He let me use the shop to build a wood stove. I built and made this metal wood stove out of somebody's hot water heater I took from underneath the counter. By the way, I was up at the Waldock house up on Deemer Creek. There's 20-acre subdivision up there, and that darn wood stove is still in that house. But anyway, I decided to forego the attic insulation and still froze my fanny off because all of that wood that I'd cut went right through the ceiling, and the heating bills were running up $300-400 with the electric baseboard. And it was crisis time. And one Saturday afternoon, the wife said, Bill, there's somebody coming up the road. And I looked out the road, and here come this two-ton Chevy truck with the stock rack. I don't know if Ron Root still has it, but he was in the front. And there was this convoy. And there was Carl Benson and Don Stam and Roy Hansen, bless his heart, and other teachers. And these trucks came up the driveway. They're all full of wood. They came into the house, and these men were unloading that wood so that my family could get through the winter. And I was embarrassed because all I had to offer them was some hot chocolate, some iced tea, and I'd never been the recipient of such a gracious gift. And I knew at that moment that this was a wonderful place to live. This was going to be my hometown. And from that day forward, I owed a debt to anybody who got themselves into a pickle. And that's why I love Plains, and I say, it's good to be home. I was talking to the Tea Party in Helena a couple of months ago, and I was telling them a hypothetical story. So this isn't true, this is made up, and Mary will tell you, I tend to communicate by telling stories. And this story, these people come to me and they said, Bill, you're a smart guy, you've got the degree, we want you to write a book. We want you to write a book on how to bring an otherwise thriving, strong, prosperous, generous, free, independent, and blessed society. How do you bring it to its knees? How do you collapse it and take it over? And so I thought about this for a moment, and I respond to these hypothetical fellows. Well, you don't need to write that book. It's already been written. If you look in the Bible, you can see all you need to do To trash a nation is to get the people to turn their backs on God. God removes his blessing, and it's all done. They say, oh, no, we don't want one of them religious books. We're atheists. We want strictly secular. I said, well, you can't be atheist because I don't believe in atheists. And if I don't believe in atheists, then atheists don't exist. So you can't be atheist. But if I was going to write that book, I would write about how society is built on certain pillars and underpinnings. And if you wanted to take it down, you need to start with at least one or two of those. If you're lucky, you can create a domino effect to bring the whole society down. But if you want to do it really quick, you get in and you take each of these pillars and you take them out. And my book would have chapters in it, such as manufacturing and industry. And somehow you have to create a circumstance of events where the government could go in and buy your major manufacturing, own your manufacturing facilities like General Motors and Chrysler. Chapter 2 would be you have to somehow get the resource, the reservoir of wealth in that country that's held in the banks, the insurance companies, and in home equity. And you have to figure out some way to get your government to control and own things like Bank of America, AGI, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. You would have to control healthcare, because if you can control and ration healthcare, you can control that society. That would be a chapter. I've run a chapter on communications, how you have to get in, control communications, not only so you could tell what everybody was saying to each other, but so that you could isolate that communications. And just on a side note, one of the Public Service Commission is to regulate utilities. This last week I have had members of virtually every telecommunications company that services in Montana, from the big ones down to Hot Springs Telephone, Ronan Telephone and Telegraph, in front of the PSC saying, help us intervene in front of the Federal Communications Commission. The Obama administration has got them promulgating these new rules that are going to decimate the hardline telephone industry, and if these go through, you will not have a Hot Springs Telephone Company or a Ronan Telephone Company, and even the big ones are worried. They're trying to force everything in through the internet. I would write a chapter on energy and how you have to separate these people from the vast reservoir of low-cost energy that is available to this prosperous nation in some way. At the Public Service Commission, we're well aware that President Obama has promised to bankrupt the coal-fired generating industry. And we just got a letter in the other day from one of those coal-fired electricity plants that said, dear PSC, because of new rules that's coming down through the EPA, we have to spend $500 million to bring our coal plant into compliance or shut it down. What are you going to do? Are you going to approve $500 million of new costs in those consumers' rates, or are you going to let us shut it down? I don't know how we're going to decide on that one, but that I've been put in between a rock and a hard place by the federal government and their decision that they are going to separate us from those vast and inexpensive reservoirs of energy that we have. I would write a chapter on inflation, and I would quote Ronald Reagan. Inflation is as violent as a mugger, as frightening as an armed robber, and deadly as a hitman. And how you have to interject monetary policies that steal the value out of those dollars. At the same time, you tell people, oh no, inflation isn't really happening. I know, and you know, that the dollar you have in your pocket is not buying what it did 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 20 years ago. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. And then I would throw in a gratuitous chapter that's in every book on how to bring down a great society, and that is to take away the people's right to self-defense. But that was what I was telling the Tea Party. That's not what I came to tell you, because you already know we're in trouble, and it is very good to see you here. I got to tell you, I'm going to leave here, and I don't care whether you think I did a good job or a bad job, but I've already got what I came for here, and that is a recognition that the movement that was started 2 years ago is still growing strong. I know that in a little while, you guys are going to probably resist and fuss and rodeo with one another, but I would hate to be somebody out there who's a liberal progressive come in here and look the faces and look in the eyes of the veterans and the people and the experience that I see sitting. We might fight, just like my family, we might fight cats and dogs in this room, but when it comes to going out there, we're shoulder to shoulder. What I came here to talk about was this hypothetical group came back to me, and they said, Bill, we've got these pockets of conservatism, these counties that just keep turning out conservative ideals, They tend to be little pockets that have been lost in time, and they're holding on to those old-fashioned values, and they seem to think what they know is right, and it's all everything. They seem to think that what we wrote in the Constitution is what we meant in the Constitution, and we'd like you to write a book on how to neutralize, how to render impotent, how to make disaffective these wonderful pockets, I would call them wonderful, they don't think they're so wonderful, of conservative thought that are out there in our state and in parts of Montana, such as Sanders County. And I would say, I don't need to write a book on that, but I'll write you a nifty little pamphlet, and this is what I would write if I was commissioned to write that. I would say the first thing you want to do is you want to convince the local officials that they need to go to nonpartisan elections. You would eliminate the incubation and the training of conservative politicians that are needed at higher levels at the state and national level, and you would render impotent those conservative areas by eliminating their ability to foster the conservatism with the name Republican on them at the local level. I did a little research on nonpartisan elections. One commentator wrote, nonpartisan elections take a situation where voters know very little and they reduce it to zero. All evidence shows that voters in nonpartisan elections behave as if they have no idea what's going on, and they turn out in far smaller numbers.
Correct.
And see, that's the problem with conservative areas. You believe it is your duty to participate in the system. It's your belief that it's your duty to come and participate in the political system, no matter how uncomfortable that is. And so you turn out and you vote. But the nonpartisan tends to turn those voter numbers down. And it eliminates the strength of one of the strongest elements that a politician can have, or someone running for office can have, and that's something called ballot name recognition. Now, name recognition generally is important, but ballot name recognition, having seen the name on the ballot. Now, I want to give you just a couple of examples of ballot name recognition. Bob Gallagher, 13 times he has run for office and failed. He ran as the Green Party, he ran for the Democratic Party, but when he put Republican next to his name and ran, he managed in 2008 to get the Montana Republican nomination for the United States Senate. That's the power of ballot name recognition. Sanders County, you have a couple of candidates with ballot name recognition. There was this guy back in the 1980s who was running for sheriff. And I don't know if my class can remember me saying, but I said, this guy keeps it up. Sooner or later, he's going to get elected sheriff, simply out of persistence and ballot name recognition. If you don't think nonpartisan elections make a difference, think about the last election in 2010. The red tide. All you had to have was Republican next to your name. It didn't matter anything else. You were likely to get elected. We got Republicans elected in places we don't see Republicans coming from. But we ran a candidate for the Montana Supreme Court on a nonpartisan basis, and he's as conservative as anybody in this room, and we couldn't get him over the hump. Tell me nonpartisan elections don't render conservatism impotent. And this is only part of the equation that's coming down from the progressive liberal side, because they're going to let places like Sanders County go nonpartisan, but they're not other places. Let me point your attention to Kinston, North Carolina, where the Obama Justice Department refused to allow Kinston to go nonpartisan. Absolutely not. We forbid it. Here's from their paper, the Justice Department ruling, which affects races for city council and mayor, went so far as to say partisan elections are necessary so that black voters can elect their candidates of choice. They have to have them. And who are their candidates of choice? Identified by the Justice Department as those who are Democrats and most exclusively black. So you've got this trend going on nationally. Find your pockets of conservative, talk them into going nonpartisan. Find your pockets where the Democrats and the progressive liberals control and force them to stay. The article went on to say the department ruled that the white voter in Kinston will vote only for blacks if they are Democrats, and therefore the city cannot get rid of the party affiliations for local elections because that would violate the black voters' right to elect the candidates they want. I'm going to throw you a bone. Bowling Greenwood. I would consider a chapter on going to all mail-in ballots if you wanted to invalidate conservatism. But I haven't developed that chapter, so I would go to my next chapter. I would use ridicule. I would get the media all fired up, and I would make it a plan, and I'm sure this has come down from the progressive liberals. Their plan for winning the 2012 election is to make fun of people like you. In Sanders County, they've done it before, and it grinds me every time they do it because it's the same old theme. If you backwater, redneck, spear-chucking, right-wing nuts would just get a little sophistication and intelligence, you'd understand that we need to have all of these policies. I know they have failed generation after generation and country after country, but we need to implement them. Now, I raised these poor kids telling them that government was about talking about issues and fleshing out the issues and arguing the merits of one position or another. But that's not what the election is going to be about in 2012. They are going to ridicule us and try to make us ashamed of our heritage and our position, and to shake us off of our position that we're right somehow because we're embarrassed by that. And if you don't think that it isn't working, President Obama would never have been elected if it had been on issues and substance. That is a good plan, and I would put it in my brochure on how to render ineffective pockets of conservatism. Third thing I would do was I would encourage and I would incite divisions within the conservative Republican Party. I used to talk to my students about how the United States is unique, that we have a two-party system. Israel and all of the European countries have multiple 6 or 8 different parties. The only reason we have a two-party system is because the rules are set up so the two parties have the control. That's the system we work in. But we have, inside this, we have some divisions. And if I wanted to render your conservatism impotent, I would encourage and foster name-calling and derision and division between you. The last thing I would do would be, if I could get all of those others on there, then I would encourage you to shut down and close up shop with your local party machine. And that would be a real shame because that would indicate that success was just around the corner. If I could get you to do that, I would eliminate your impact even on the nonpartisan races. I would eliminate your input on district races like Public Service Commission and statewide races like these gentlemen have. And let me tell you, and I don't mean anything disrespectful for the guys that are here from the state Republican Party, because there were things you did, especially that voter registration business. I was the beneficiary of that. But when it came to my race, they were there as a resource. I could ask for help, but they weren't super involved in my race. And it was a miracle that I won, given how much money Ken Toole had, and given that his ballot recognition. He'd been on the ballot 8 times before I showed up. But I'll tell you, the miracle of my winning that race and taking out that potent, progressive, liberal Ken Toole was because I had county central committees who opened doors for me that otherwise would not have opened. It was Bill Gallagher having breakfast with the farmers. It was Bill Gallagher having tea with the ladies. It was social events to meet Bill Gallagher. It was donor lists. I want to take you out. I want to take you around and introduce you to some guys with some checkbooks that could write. It was sign locations. The Central Committee is critical. These guys, this Sanders County, you're home for me. And I am so proud. I am so proud that these guys are here to see the folks from my hometown. But they need the local Central Committee to get done what they do. And if you eliminate that, you render yourself impotent. Let me just give you an example of how important that is. You know, this Ken Toole guy is a potent liberal, and he was headed for the governor because the Democrats used the PSC as an incubator for statewide races. And so he was going to be their inside man. He is an environmental leftist, I'm not saying anything he wouldn't tell you. He's not ashamed of his position in politics. But he was a potent force. After I won election, I went back to look at those other 7 races that he had run before me, where he had got that ballot name recognition, and this was the number, 1,437 votes. That wasn't just one race he won by 1,437 votes. He had won all 7 of his races by 1,437 votes. That guy was squeaking into Helena and subsisting on your tax dollars and affecting significant progressive liberal changes because we were just coming up a hair short every time. In 2006, we got John Tester. Aren't we happy with that? John Tester won in 2006. He is not going to win in 2012. But let me tell you, we wouldn't even be having this debate if 1,781 people had voted differently in Montana. 1,781 people is all it would have taken to change from John Tester to Conrad Burns. Just to put Sanders County into perspective, you guys had 7,700 voters in that election, and 5,035 of you came out to vote. You guys have the power to change the course of history in elections like that, and I don't predict that the red tide is going to continue. Going forward, it's going to be just like it has been. Some of these races are going to be won and lost by razor-thin margins, and we need the counties like Sanders to get them over the top. I'm going to finish up with one last story, and it's a story from when I was in high school. This one happens to be true. I was a football player, you know that from my size, but I was also in band. I played trumpet. First trumpet, as a matter of fact, my junior and senior year. The only reason I signed up for band was because there was a pretty girl named Gayla Starr, and I saw her sign-up sheet, and she was in band, and so I signed up for band too. They said, what do you want to play? I said, one of those. And so I was pretty natural at it, and I practiced it. I had to sit by Gayla Starr, who never, by the way, gave me even the time of the day, only an occasional smile. But hey, I gave it a good shot. I enjoyed band, and I played trumpet, and when you're in the band, just like it happens with drama club and choir and everything else, you have first trumpet, second trumpet, third trumpet. And it's usually ranked on skill, and the first trumpet get to play melody, second harmony, third are usually playing the rhythm. And in band class, at each quarter, at the beginning, there was an opportunity for challenge. And if you wanted to move up from third trumpet to second trumpet, you just would declare that you would challenge somebody. And so I was a big man on campus, high school football stud and all of that, and I was first trumpet, which got me a lot of grease with the mothers of the girls, the other girls other than Gayla Starr. But there was this freshman who challenged me when I started senior year, challenged me for first trumpet. And what would happen when you get a challenge, the music director would give you each a piece, you'd practice it up, you'd come and you'd play your piece solo in front of the band, and then there was a weighted, it was kind of like that show where the all-star thing, but whoever won got to be that first trumpet. And lo and behold, old Bill spent his first semester of his senior year squeezed in between two buck-toothed girls playing second trumpet. It wasn't very cool, and I didn't like it, and it made me mad, and I got all excited about playing the trumpet again, because I'd gotten like the days ago. I'd taken it for granted, and this freshman took me out, and the end of the story is I finished up my senior year playing first trumpet. But I tell you that story because whether it's football analogy, whether it's band, whether it's choir, whether it's Republican politics, whether your job on this team is water boy or girl, manager, lineman, that's what I played in football. I was the lineman. They're the guys, ladies, they're in the middle. They just bang into each other. Didn't get to carry the football, and I didn't get the cheerleaders to ever wanted to kiss me because I was always muddy. But I played where the team needed me, and wherever you're needed. And in whatever group it is, there are times when there's challenges. When I walked on that football field at the start of the season, I was in competition. If I wanted to be a fullback or a quarterback, I went out for that spot, and I gave it my best. And it was a fair and square competition, and I gave it all I had against the guy who was in that spot, and we did it fairly and with integrity and with honor. And at the end of the day, if he got the job, he got the job. I was put in the place where the coach felt I was needed the most. And can you imagine what kind of a football player I would have been in the first big game, and I was the blocker there, if I was still mad, sour grapes, that he got the job that I wanted. And so instead of doing my job, I let the defender rush through and tackled him. When he got lost of yardage, I went over to the coach and I said, you made a mistake. The wrong guy. You picked the wrong guy there. He got tackled. Isn't that silly? I'm going to lose on that football team. In every one of those is an example, including Republican politics. There are seasons of challenge. And the point I want to leave with you is there will be other seasons of challenges. It doesn't end here today with this. And in Republican politics, our seasons of challenge happen here in the county convention. And I've been to several of these. And Greg was asking me, it's not unusual for there to be very intense feelings, and just like there was in those football days, and doing our best. But there are going to be other challenges, and at the end of the day, the enemy isn't in this room. The enemy is in the progressive liberals. And if we don't wake up and do our best, I mean, we're just like family, we'll put it all on the table here today. When we walk out that door today, it's shoulder to shoulder, and let's go out there in 2012 and let's clean up. Sanders County, I am so very proud of you, and I am so thrilled that all of you have taken the interest in it today. I wish you very best with your convention today. We can do this. We have to do this. It's on the line. Thank you very much for your kind attention.